Hi, boys and girls. Mrs. Blackburn here, reading Merlin and the Dragons by Jane Yolen, illustrated by Lee Ming. This is a Fountas and Pinnell Heinemann book. This book and other books are written versions of legends. Some of you are big legend fans, so I'm sure you're excited about this. A legend is a cultural story that people accept as true, even though they cannot prove that it's true. Often legends include elements of magic or some kind of impossible deed. So think of stories that you know. Do any of them fit the description of a legend? And Merlin is part of the legend of King Arthur. So the title of this book is Merlin and the Dragons. So you may have read a version of this before or seen a movie like this. So let's go ahead and get started. Beautiful illustrations. Okay. The night was dark and storm clouds marched along the sky. Rain beat against the gray castle walls. Inside, in a bedroom hung with tapestries, the young King Arthur had trouble sleeping. Awake, he was frightened. Asleep, he had disturbing dreams. At last he climbed out of bed, took a candle to light his way, and started out the door. Suddenly, remembering his crown, he turned back and found it under the bed, where he'd tossed it angrily hours before. It felt too heavy for his head, so he carried it, letting it swing from his fingers. As he walked along the hall, strange shadows danced before him, but none were as frightening as the shadows in his dreams. He climbed the tower stairs slowly, biting his lip. When he reached the top, he pushed open the wooden door. The old magician was asleep in his chair, but woke at once, his eyes quick as a hawk. One of the things I want to talk to you about is visualizing. So good readers visualize, and you'll need to do that even though the illustrations are absolutely fantastic here. As I'm reading, before I show you the pictures, the illustrations, I want you to have this movie or this picture going on in your mind of what's happening. So for example, when I read, "The night was dark and storm clouds marched along the sky, rain beat against the gray castle walls," I want you should be picturing a version of that in your head. It's called visualizing. So get ready to picture it in your mind. "What is it, boy?" the old man asked. "What brings you here at this hour?" "I am the king," Arthur said, but softly, as he were not really sure. "I go where I will." He put the crown on Merlin's desk. "You are a boy," Merlin replied, "and boys should be in their beds asleep." Arthur sighed. "I could not sleep," he said. "I had bad dreams." "Ah," Merlin nodded knowingly. "Dreams." He held out a hand to the boy, but Arthur didn't dare touch those long, gnarled fingers. Visualizing that? "Let me read your dreams." "It is one dream, actually," Arthur said, "and always the same. A fatherless boy who becomes king simply by pulling a sword from a stone." "Ah," Merlin said again, withdrawing his fingers. "I know the very child. But if you cannot tell me more of your dream, I shall have to tell you one of mine. After all, a dream told is a story. What better than a story on a rainy night?" Arthur settled onto a low stool and gazed up at the wizard. A story? He hadn't known he wanted a story. He'd come seeking comfort and companionship. A story was better than both. He listened as Merlin began. Is that what you visualized his gnarled fingers to look like? Or maybe a little different? Either way, whatever you pictured in your mind isn't wrong. In a small village high up in the rugged mountains of Wales lived a lonely, fatherless boy named Emrys. Dark-haired he was and small, with sharp, bright eyes and a mouth that rarely smiled. Oh, I can picture him in my head. He was troubled by dreams, sleeping and waking, dreams of dragons, dreams of stone. His mother was the daughter of the local king and tried to be both mother and father to him. But a princess is only taught lute songs and needlework and prayers. She'd never once climbed a tree after a bird's egg or skinned her knee pursuing a lizard or caught a butterfly in a net. Emrys had to invent that part of growing up himself, and a lonely inventing it turned out to be. The other boys in the village teased him for not knowing who his father was. "Mother's babe," they cried, chasing him from their games. So Emrys went after birds, eggs, and lizards, butterflies and frogs by himself, giving them names both odd and admiring, like Flutterby and Wriggletail, and making up stories of their creation. And he chanted strange-sounding spells because he liked the sounds, spells that sometimes seemed to work, most times did not. But he never told his dreams aloud, dreams of dragons, dreams of stone. Think about the relationship between Arthur and Merlin. How would you describe it? How would you describe that relationship between Arthur and Merlin? Seems that, let's see here. Now in the village lived an old man who knew all sorts of things, from readings and writing to how birds speak and why leaves turn brown in autumn. And because Emrys was the son of a princess, the grandson of a king, the old man taught him all he knew. It was this learning that brought the village boys to him, not in friendship, but in curiosity. They would ask Emrys to show them some trick with the birds or to tell them stories. Glad for the company, Emrys always obliged. He even took to making up harmless predictions to amuse them. The rain would soon fall, he would say, and often it did. The first spring robin will arrive, and soon after it came. Now my farmer's son could have made the same right guesses, and after a while the village boys were no longer impressed. However, one day Emrys found a book of seasons and planetary movements in the old man's cottage and read it cover to cover. Then he went out and announced to the astonished boys, "Tomorrow the sun will disappear." The next day at noon, just as the calendar had foretold, an eclipse plunged the countryside into darkness. The boys and their parents were equally horrified and blamed Emrys. From then on, he was called Demon Sun and avoided altogether. Years went by and Emrys grew up, terribly alone, dreaming dreams he did not understand. Dreams of a shaking tower, dreams of fighting dragons. One day, when Emrys was 12, a cruel and ruthless man named Vortigern came to the valley. Vortigern had unjustly declared himself high king over all Britain, but the country was at last in revolt against him, and he had been forced to flee, riding ever farther north and west. At last he had arrived at the front door of Dinas Emrys, the mountain which towered above the village, with a bedraggled army on tired horses, bearing tattered banners emblazoned with red dragons. A handful of court musicians rode with them. Vortigern pointed to the jagged mountain peak. "There," he said, in a voice hard and determined, "there I will build my battle tower, so that I may see my enemies when they approach." He turned to his soldiers. "Gather the people of this village and bring them to me, for they will be the hackers and haulers. They will make me a tower of stone." Young Emrys looked on in amazement. Banners sewn with red dragons? A tower of stone? Such things had been in his dreams. What could it all mean? The Welsh stonecutters began their work under the watchful eyes of the soldiers. For many days they mined the stone, cutting huge pieces from the sides of Denny's Emrys. They swore they could hear the cries of the mountain at each cut. Next they hauled the stones with ropes, their little Welsh ponies groaning with effort. Finally came the day when they built the tower up on the mountainside, stone upon stone, until it rose high above the valley. That night Emrys went to bed and dreamed once again his strange dreams. He dreamed that the tower, the very one built by Vortigern, shook and swayed and tumbled to the ground, and he dreamed that beneath the tower slept two dragons, one red as Vortigern's banners and one white. That very night the High King's tower began to shudder and shake and, with a mighty crash, came tumbling down. In the morning, when he saw what had happened, Vortigern was furious, convinced the villagers had done it on purpose. "Your work is worthless," he bellowed at the Welshmen. "You will be whipped, and then you will get to work all over again." So the Welshmen had to go back to their stonework, great welts on their backs. They hacked and hauled, and once again the tower rose high above the valley. But the night they were finished, it was the same. The tower shook and tumbled to the ground. By morning, there was only a jumble of stone. Are you making predictions? Vortigern drove the villagers even harder, and by the following week the tower was once again rebuilt. But a third time in the night a great shudder went through the mountain, and the work once again lay in ruins. Vortigern's rage could not be contained. He called for his magicians. "There is some dark Welsh magic here. Find out the cause. My tower must stand." Now these magicians had neither knowledge nor skill, but in their fear of Vortigern's, they put on a good show. They consulted the trees, both bark and root. They threw the magic sticks of prophecy. They played with the sacred stones of fate. At last they reported their findings. "You must find a fatherless child," they said, "a child spawned by a demon. You must sprinkle his blood on the stones. Only then will the gods of this land let the stone stand." They smiled at one another and at Vortigern, smiles of those sure that what they cannot be done. Vortigern did not notice their smiles. "Go find me such a child." The magician stopped smiling and looked nervous. "We do not know if any such child exists," they said. "We do not know if your tower can stand." Furious, Vortigern turned to his soldiers. "Gold to whomever brings me such a child," he roared. They thought they fooled him, but doesn't look very good, does it? Before the soldiers could move, a small voice cried out, "Please, sir, we of the village know such a boy." The speaker was a spindly lad named William. "Come here, child," said Vortigern. "Name him." William did not dare get too close to the High King. "His name is Emry, sir. He was spawned by a demon. He can cry the sun from the sky." Vortigern turned to the captain of his guards. "Bring this demon's son to me." At that very moment, Emrys was on the mountain with the old man, absorbed in a very strange dream. Under the ruins of the tower, he saw two huge stone eggs breathing in and out. Just as he emerged from his dream, he was set upon by Vortigern's soldiers. "What shall I do?" he cried. The old man put a hand on his shoulder. "Trust your dreams." The soldiers quickly bound Emrys and carried him to the High King, but Emrys refused to show any fear. "You are the boy without a father, the boy spawned by a devil?" Vortigern asked. "I am a boy without a father, true," Emry said, "but I am no demon son. You have been listening to the words of a frightened children." The villagers and soldiers gasped at his impudence, but Vortigern said, "I will have your blood either way." "Better that you have my dream," Emry said. "Only my dream can guide you so that your tower will stand." He's very bold, isn't he, to stand up to him like that? The boy spoke with such conviction, Vortigern hesitated. "I have dreamed that beneath your tower lies a pool of water that must be drained. In the mud you will find 2 hollow stones. In each stone is a sleeping dragon. It is the breath of each sleeping dragon that shakes the earth and makes the tower fall. Kill the dragons and your tower will stand." Vortigern turned to his chief magician. "Can this be true?" The chief magician stroked his chin. "Dreams can come true." Vortigern hesitated no longer. "Untie the boy, but watch him. He said to use his soldiers, and you, Welshman, do as the boy says. Dig beneath the rubble." So the Welshman removed the stones and dug down until they came to a vast pool of water. Then the soldiers drained the pool, and just as Emrys had prophesied, at the pool's bottom lay 2 great stones. The stones seemed to be breathing in and out, and at each breath the mud around them trembled. "Stonecutters," cried Vortigern, "break open the stones." 2 men with mighty hammers descended into the pit and began to pound upon the stones. I don't think those are stones, do you? What do you think they are? Once, twice, 3 times their hammers rang out. On the 3rd try, like jets of lightning crack ran around each stone, and they broke apart as if they had been giant eggs. Out of one emerged a dragon white as new milk. Out of the other a dragon red as old wine. Astonished at the power of his dreaming, Emrys opened and closed his mouth, but could not speak. The men in the pit scrambled for safety. The High King Vortigern looked pleased. "Kill them! Kill the dragons!" But even as he spoke, the dragons shook out their wings and leaped into the sky. "They are leaving," cried the chief magician. "They are away," cried the soldiers. "They will not go quite yet," whispered Emrys. So sooner had he spoken than the dragons wheeled about in the sky to face one another, claws out, belching flame. Their battle cries like nails on slate echoed in the air. Advancing on one another, the dragons clashed breast to breast, raining teeth and scales on the ground. For hour after hour they fought, filling the air with smoke. Oh, look at those fighting dragons. First the red dragon seemed to be winning, then the white. First one drew blood, then the other. At last, with a furious slash of its jaws, the white dragon caught the red by the throat. There was a moment of silence, and then the red dragon tumbled end over end until it hit the ground. The white dragon followed it down, straddling its fallen foe, and screaming victory into the air with a voice like thunder. "Kill it! Kill the white one now!" shouted Vortigern. As it freed from a spell, his soldiers readied their weapons. But before a single arrow could fly, the white dragon leaped back into the air and was gone, winging over the highest peak Just so the red dragon of Vortigern shall be defeated, Emry said, but not so loud the High King could hear. Cursing the fleeing dragon, Vortigern ordered the tower to be built again. Then he turned to Emrys. If the tower does not stand this time, I will have your blood. So Emry says that Vortigern will be defeated just like the red dragon was. Why do you think he believes this? Do you think he was brave, or do you think he was foolish to say that out loud? Even though he said it really quietly. Do you think he was brave, or do you think he was foolish? That night, young Emry stared out his window past the newly built tower. A hawk circled lazily in the sky. Suddenly, the hawk swooped down, landing on his window ledge. There was a moment of silent communion between them, as if Emrys could read the hawk's thoughts, as if the hawk could read his. Then away the hawk flew. Mountains, valleys, hillsides, forests gave way beneath the hawk's wings until, far off in the distance, it spied thousands of flickering lights coming up from the south. As if in a dream, Emry saw these things too. Emerging from his vision, Emrys turned from the window and went downstairs. He found King Vortigern by the foot of the tower. I've seen in a vision that your fate is linked with the red dragons, Emrys cried. You will be attacked by thousands of soldiers under the white dragon's flag, attacked and slain. Vortigern drew his sword, angry enough to kill the boy for such insolence. But at that very moment, a lookout atop the tower shouted, Soldiers, my lord! Thousands of them! Vortigern raced to the top of the tower stairs and stared across the valley. It was true, and as he watched further, one of the knights leading the army urged his horse forward and raced along to the tower foot, shouting, Come and meet your fate, murderous Vortigern. Vortigern turned to his own men. Defend me, defend my tower. But when they saw the numbers against them, the men all deserted. Surrender, Vortigern, cried 1,000 voices. Never, he called back, never. The old wizard stopped speaking. Well? Arthur asked. What happened to Vortigern? You cannot end a story there. Merlin looked at him carefully. What do you think happened? Vortigern was slain just as Emry said. Is that the boy speaking? Asked the wizard, or the king? The boy, admitted Arthur. A king should forgive his enemies and make them his chiefest friends. You taught me that, Merlin. But what did happen? The men of the White Dragon defeated Vortigern all right, burned him up in his own tower, and that night, the one who rode up to the tower first, what became of him? His name was Uther Pendragon, and he eventually became the High King, Merlin said. Uther, mused Arthur, he was the last High King before me? But then he was a hero. He was fit to rule. Perhaps one of his sons will come to claim my throne. Uther had only one son, Merlin said softly. Only I knew of it. He looked steadily at the boy. That son was you, Arthur. So the White Knight who defeated Vortigern was Arthur's father. Why do you think Merlin chose this story to tell Arthur? Why do you think? Maybe you'll know after this page. Me? For a moment, Arthur's voice squeaked. Uther was my father? Then I am not fatherless? Then I'm king by right and not just because I pulled a sword from a stone? Merlin shook his head. Don't underestimate your real strength in pulling that sword, Merlin cautioned. It took a true and worthy king to do what you did. Arthur gave a deep sigh. Why did you not tell me this before? The old wizard's hawk eyes opened wide. I could not tell you until you were ready. There are rules for prophets, just as there are rules for kings. So now I am king in truth. Merlin smiled. You were always king in truth, only you doubted it. So you can thank your dreams for waking you up. What of Emery's? Arthur asked. What happened to him? Oh, he's still around, replied the wizard. Went on dreaming, made a career of it. He rummaged around in some old boxes and crates by the desk until he found what he was looking for. I still have this. Saved it all this time. He tossed a large yellowed dragon's tooth across to Arthur. Sudden recognition dawned on Arthur's face. You? You saved this? Then you were the boy named Emery's? Surely you guessed that before, Merlin teased. But now perhaps we can both go back to sleep. Thank you, Merlin, Arthur said. I don't think I shall dream any more bad dreams. Merlin's gnarled fingers caged the boy's hand for a moment. But you shall dream, he said quietly. Great men dream great dreams, and I have dreamed your greatness. He plucked the crown from the top desktop. Don't forget this, my lord king. Arthur took the crown and placed it carefully on his head. Then he turned, went out the door, and down the tower stairs. Merlin watched for a moment more, then sank back down in his chair. Closing his eyes, he fell immediately to sleep, dreaming of knights and a round table. Okay, so let's think about Merlin's reason for not telling Arthur about his father sooner. Merlin says that both prophets and kings have rules to follow. So how might it have affected Arthur to know sooner the name of his father? What do you think about that? If you were thinking that maybe he would have felt maybe a little more entitled to be the king, instead of the dreams came to him, so because the dreams came to him, he kind of figured out that he was meant to be the king, not that he was just born to be the king, that it was something that he was meant to be. So that is why Merlin waited. So if you were thinking that, you were correct. So what do you think the author wants you to take away from this story? What do you think? What do you think the author wants you to take away from this story? Some messages about courage, some messages about bravery. Yes. About believing in yourself. Very good. And, we talked about how this is a legend. It definitely is. Legends have many different versions. This was a very unique version. I think I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to do your follow-up activities in your folder this week. Have a good day. Bye-bye.